Welcome this evening to the Plain Township Board of Trustees meeting for May 12th. If everybody will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before us, we have our agenda as presented. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections by fellow board members or department heads at this time?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna actually, under concerns of trustees, I'm gonna put employee recognition, and SCTA, and then just under road. Hey, Joe, I hope you don't mind. I want to put just a verbal update on the State Route 43 and market study in the 55th Street and the Firestone tracks.
Okay, yeah, not a problem.
Okay. Are there any other additions or deletions or corrections? Okay. Barring none, the agenda will stand as amended. The first item that we have on the agenda here this evening is a sheriff's report. Do we have Lieutenant Carver on the line with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. The item we have here was a noise issue on Bottler. I know we've had some conversation on there. So there's been some exchange, and as a backdrop, essentially the property runs between High Spire, and then the back edge of the property comes out on Bottler where there's a barn, and to the west of the barn, the open area between the barn and the separate residence, there's what could be construed as a small tract. There's two dirt mounds. I had stopped by yesterday, took pictures and forwarded those to everybody. That was to go in addition to the video link that the resident had passed along to us. As a backdrop, we've been told that there's been some regular noise issues over there, but I know from the zoning office, Tom Farrar, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have not received any calls or complaints regarding noise for that specific property that we have.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. The second piece, Lieutenant Carver, you guys pulled some reporting information out at the sheriff's office on this specific property. And do you care to just speak to what you guys had there, and then ultimately we'll dovetail into Eric Williams?
Yes, I've looked at our call history for 2018 and 2019. Did not see any calls for service to that specific address. Looking at 2020, we've had 5 calls. I believe they started in the month of April, and all 5 of them were, through April and the beginning of May. When our deputies have arrived on scene there, the activity was not actively going on at the time. However, the deputies did speak with the homeowners, and also I know with the complainant, at least on 1 or 2 occasions, I kind of try to mediate a little bit as far as, being respectful of the amount of riding and times of day and all that. All the calls that we've received have been later in the afternoon and evening hours. One of the questions that came up with our folks was, they felt a little bit like we're getting into some gray area, whether the noise ordinance would apply. But we tried to mediate the situation as best as we could between the neighbors. Obviously you guys have seen the the video that was sent in, and it's certainly a concerning as far as that homeowner and the noise. And I think you mentioned, probably speaking with Eric a little further as far as the opinion whether that noise ordinance applies to that. I did have the opportunity today to drive around that neighborhood a little bit. I talked to a couple other folks over on High Spire that, said they hear the noise as well. It wasn't necessarily bothersome to them, but, they indicated there's several other houses in the area that have similar type vehicles and use them. I guess that's where we're at to this point.
Okay. And I do know, and maybe Eric, before we jump to you, I know we're supposed to have some residents joining the call tonight, and typically under the sheriff's report, if we would have that participant, do we want to go ahead and let them speak first, and then Eric, you can talk through the legal aspect of our home rule resolution and so forth regarding noise as it relates to sheriff's capabilities?
Sure.
Okay. Do we have on the line residents that had communicated the concern over noise on the line? If you are on the line, we would ask that you please state your name and address for the fiscal officer for the record.
You have Dave and Mona Scarlett, 3838 Bottler Street.
Okay. If you go ahead, and the floor is yours to present any additional comments you have.
Yes, our house is directly next to the track, and when those bikes are going, they are so loud that I can't even hear in my office, which I am in right now, and it goes multiple times per day. This has been the first quiet day in 13 days. And I'm so thankful our neighbors across the street who had a whole team of their mulching had a beautiful quiet day to do their work. That's all I can say. It's very loud. It's very stressful. It gives us headaches. It's unbelievable. We have multiple videos. I've written down every time they've ridden in the past 13 days. They're literally driving us crazy. Now, I don't hear of any other bike in the neighborhood anywhere or I do hear motorcycles going down the street from time to time, but they go, they're gone. Yay. But as far as I don't hear anyone else riding these type of bikes in my neighborhood right here. Those two. My husband's sitting right here. Wants to add anything?
Well, basically, if it's a nice day out, you got to get up and shut all your windows, your doors, or it's just terrible. And then the dust and the dirt will blow this way, depending on the wind. But it just interrupts your whole day. If you're reading a book, doing this, whatever,
I work.
It's deafening.
I work from home. I work from home and have for 14 years. And what the last 2 years was miserable.
And I did
Mona.
approach him last year. And
Okay, they're muting us now.
Mona. All right, I'm sorry. If one of you could mute, we'll get feedback from the other.
I'm done. I can't hear anything.
Eric, mute everybody's line except theirs.
Okay, I muted my husband because we don't have a camera and an audio where we could just see the same thing. We are on 2 different sets.
Okay.
Anyway, it's very nerve-wracking. It's making all of our neighbors miserable. I'm not sure if there's anyone else on here or not. All the ones who signed the letter that I sent there to you guys. But every one of us absolutely hate it. It drives us all crazy, and we just want it to stop.
Do we have anybody else in the audience that wishes to address the board regarding this specific matter? Okay. Barring no additional feedback, Eric Williams, I'm going to transition to you just based upon what we have from zoning, what we have from the sheriff's office and Lieutenant Carver, as well as resident, and then talk to that based upon our zoning.
I think that Lieutenant Carver did it well when he said that we are right smack in the middle of the gray area here. This is this is kind of not what we intended when we did the original noise ordinance. That was done more for larger gatherings and house parties and things of that nature. But essentially what we have is a situation where anytime we're enforcing the noise ordinance, context is so important. So you have all those easy things to look at. Like if this were going on at 1 a.m, it's easy, right? It's unreasonable, it's excessive, it's all of that kind of stuff. If this were going on around the clock, okay, that's easy. This now comes down into the discretionary portion of that ordinance that we all kind of have opinions on, and we all probably could interpret differently. But the truth of the matter is that there is discretion within that ordinance. So it requires context. If your neighbor has a tree down and they're using a chainsaw, it might take them all day and they might run that chainsaw all day. We're never going to say that that's a violation of the noise ordinance. So that's easy on the other side. So we really do have to have context, and there's really no way for me as the law director to say, well, this is a violation and this is not, unless it's one of those easy ones on either side. This is definitely within the discretionary portion of that ordinance.
So that being said, I know one of the things, and I'm comparing a prior situation that we had over at the old golf course off of Middle Branch.
Sure.
You know, I forget what the establishment used to be called, but you know, when they'd have bands or something, we went off of the distance component. And when you let's say we take a look at that from a distance in relation to where the fact that these parcels are so close together, even if this was is it safe to say, even if this was like a low decibel thing, I mean, they're clearly more higher pitched, not only based upon the video that's been provided, but just from experience. I know, having lived over in that older part of the neighborhood off of Northview before, there's some other areas back in there where dirt bikes and four-wheelers do get back in the wooded area. So it's definitely a little bit removed from right up against the residential area, but it can indeed be heard. So going back to the distance thing, but just the proximity of these properties, would even that type of circumstance be considered circumstantial or gray area as well? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think it is. Do we know how's it zoned over there?
It's all R1, I believe, all R1 up in there.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that it is one of those things that certainly I can sympathize with what these folks are going through, especially working from home. I get the point of the complaint for sure. As I said, without the proper context at any given time, it's hard to make a blanket rule. I don't think we can. I don't think we've ever done that. It always requires the interpretation of a discretionary ordinance like this. Always requires some form of context and always some form of discretion. And I'm not sure. I mean, all I can tell you is I do know that this was not the type of thing we had in mind when we passed it, but I can see the argument for why, certainly it should be applied, but it certainly wasn't, the context wasn't what we had in mind when we passed it.
Well, I think going back to that, because I've been here, this is 11 years. I think this was when Lou and Al and myself were here. And a lot of it had to do with the business more so the business establishment type activity.
But particular businesses, bars, concert type venues, things like that is really what we were gearing to kind of remedy. It really wasn't. We didn't have this kind of situation in mind when we did that.
And I think the concern, even at that point, where we almost went more off of distance as compared to, say, decibel meters and so forth, is because the equipment, the maintenance, the training, and so forth. And when we looked at that in comparison to frequency or volume of this type of related complaint activity, it didn't seem to be justifiable at that point. But I know, for the sake of our residents on the phone, is there, outside of telling them right now under the current language, there's nothing we can immediately do outside of the sheriff catching them in the act and then warning, and then it's citations like we've done with some of the other, establishments? Is there really anything else? Just, I don't want to get into creating a rule for one-off situations. We create the broad framework for collective good, because we know what happens when you start creating one-off rules. It wreaks absolute havoc for our law enforcement and zoning staff. So is there anything that we can explore or we can advise our residents to explore?
I think we can certainly have a conversation with law enforcement, with our sheriff's deputies, about what types of context would be needed to issue a citation for something like this. But again, you're never going to be able to list all the qualifications.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, as frustrating as it may be for the homeowners next to them, if these guys are going out there like over a lunch break from 12 to 1 on an almost daily basis, then I don't see how we could apply that. People have to mow their lawn. People have to do, I don't see how we could find that excessive or unreasonable. That's why the context piece of this is so important.
John or Brooke, do you guys have anything to interject at this point?
No, I'm just running through my mind. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I was on the board at the time, but didn't we have something similar to this at the corner of Plains Center and Martindale when they were doing some construction? Why am I thinking that at that point they like built some tracks and they were doing the same thing? And I think, I don't remember all the circumstances involved, but somehow I think they got that at least not totally eliminated, but I think the duration was shortened considerably. But I wasn't on the board then, and I don't remember the process. Eric, do you remember that?
I remember that what you're referring to, and it was an issue where we got them to kind of come together and come up with some more peaceful arrangement.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it was, as you referred to there, John, I think it was a duration issue in that particular case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a time issue.
You're right, Tom.
They were doing it later.
Okay.
I think I heard the homeowner maybe wanted to jump back in.
I think Mona,
Hello.
Dave, were
Yes,
either
hello.
of you looking to?
Yes. On the as far as running a chainsaw, doing tree cleanup, yard maintenance, all that stuff, I've done all that stuff. That's a necessary noise. This is an unnecessary noise nuisance.
Well, I would disagree with you. You cannot deny them the right or the opportunity to use their property. This goes back to what the law director's talking is context. Just because you deem something necessary and somebody else deems it unnecessary doesn't substantiate. That's where, again, the whole context piece.
Right. And the whole context is these motorbikes are 10 times louder than a mower or a chainsaw. They are way louder than that. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be yelling. But it's not just once at lunchtime. It's throughout the day, all day. They go for 15 minutes, then they quit. Then they come back out, then they quit. Then they come back out, then they quit. And they do it all day, and it's been happening for the last 12 days. You can't tell me that is right, that they can do that and hinder our lives. It is so loud.
First of all, let me be clear about something. I didn't accuse them of doing it only at lunch. That was an example that I used. And I haven't weighed in on whether this is right or wrong or indifferent. All I'm telling you is the legal standard we're trying to apply. That's all I'm bringing to the
Right. They're ruining all of our lives. So they're allowed to do that according to your noise ordinance. They're allowed to infringe on all of our lives.
Mona, that is
Once
not
again,
what we're saying under any shape, form, or context.
Okay.
So we'll talk through this. Realistically, I think the only immediate option could be as a request to the property owner to ask if there's any type of different type of exhaust or muffler that would quiet it, because to tell them they can't ride a dirt bike, a four-wheeler or something on private property, that's not going to hold up in any legal challenge at the end of the day, if they're not, you know, out operating illegally on roads or something like that. So, I mean, Eric, do you think, and Lieutenant Carver, do you guys from a legal law enforcement aspect think, I mean, even a conversation with the property owner saying, hey, we understand, you know, you're doing this so your kids can get out of the house, but we're also trying to strike the balance of peace within the neighborhood, so there's not mutiny amongst neighbors, so to say. I mean, to me, that's the only thing where, I mean, we approach them and we can recommend that. But honestly, if they thumb their nose at us, I don't see where we've got a leg to stand on at this point based upon the current language.
Or try talking to them to see if maybe they will utilize it during your lunch hour, since you're working from home, or on the weekends when you're not working, or after work hours for a limited amount of time. Maybe talk to them and see if they'll work anything out.
We tried that once before. They didn't care. And this is not just about me. It's about all of our neighbors. This is bothering everybody. And I know there's more of them on here. They're just probably afraid to get involved. And that takes getting involved to get anything done. And if you were sitting here in my home listening to that every single day, I think all of you would change your mind. And I have to walk away from this because I'm getting too upset.
Well, you can agree to disagree, but our board has a responsibility and obligation to work within the confines of the law and our home rule resolutions and statutes. Otherwise, it's easy to say you would do something if you were in these shoes, but when we take our oath and we have a bond, we're not going to violate and create an unnecessary liability for the people of Plain Township, nor on ourselves individually. So, I mean, that being said, I think Eric and Lieutenant Carver, feel free to chime in. Do we go have that? Can we go approach them saying, hey, this was escalated during last evening's board meeting. We technically have to operate with it. You know, just be honest, frank, and transparent, and that here's the confines. We're asking you to maybe work within these confines, which is change out the stupid exhaust on the thing or whatever. And I can directly relate given the circumstances over there, because when I lived off of Northview, the woods that was right next at the end of the street, they had the four-wheelers and the dirt bikes going through it all the time. I could hear it, and it was annoying, but unfortunately, I also couldn't go tramping on their property to try to shut them down. So I'm trying to build some type of reasonable consensus here within the parameters that I think we have.
Well, I'm just following your ordinance on your website, exactly what it says. And I'm 60 feet away from this track. And if that track would have been here when we looked at this house 15 years ago, we would have never bought it, but it wasn't. It was just put in 2 years ago, and it has been a nuisance to all of us. And it is so loud, and it gives us headaches. It's causing health issues. And I hope you guys can do something about it. That's all. I'm done.
Well, we can't get into health issues because that would be HIPAA conversation. So, I mean, again, Eric, for the sake of this topic, where we're at, we know what legally, Lieutenant Carr, let's take a sidebar conversation, see what we can get, you know, maybe in a direct approach to the resident. John or Brooke, do you have any additional thoughts on going with that approach?
That would be the first thing, you know, and obviously this particular issue just came to our attention. So I know Lieutenant has said they've been up there a couple times, but they haven't been able to witness it. Yeah, so obviously we have to pursue that as well. But I think we can, through some indirect conversation, try to come up with some solution
If I could chime in, I absolutely understand what she's saying. I don't doubt that that is an annoyance and a disturbance right next to your house, as close as that track is. I understand that. Like they've said, we're bound to operate within what the law says we can do. That being said, we're more than happy to be involved to try to help mediate and maybe come up with some sort of an arrangement where maybe they use the track certain days or certain times, things like that. Also, Kent Municipal Court has a mediation program that might be something that would be helpful to get them involved in through that way to help work this out. We're certainly here to try to help the situation as best we can. We just have to operate in what we believe is the accurate interpretation of the law.
Sure.
But we don't have anything to do with the mediation part with the Canton Court. You would take that, or they could do that on their own.
That's
Just
a
to
private.
clarify for them.
Yeah, we can refer them to that. We can't require them to participate in it.
But it's an option for them.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've denoted what we're going to do as far as next steps here. I don't think there's any additional information here to cover. Anything else under the sheriff's report, Lieutenant Carver, that you would have for the board? You good?
No, I would just comment, the monthly report was sent out and the numbers were what we would have expected with everything going on. Nothing particularly remarkable to comment on about it.
Okay. Have we had any more visits over to Sharonwood and Fulton regarding the Dairy Queen? Our one resident had sent that email again of that traffic backed out. I've tried going over there in the evening a couple times to see, and I have not experienced that yet, but the fact that it is showing backed out on the Fulton and blocking Sharonwood.
Yes, and I've shared that with our guys. It seems like it's generally in the evening hours, and we're seeing the same thing you are. It's hit or miss of depending on how many people want ice cream that night, of whether it's backed up or not, and how they pull in. If the cars pull in off to the drive-through off of Hills and Dales and line up that way, it's generally not a problem. But the ones that pull in off of Sharonwood kind of create a bottleneck, and the business owners try to be accommodating as far as signage and things like that. And we've talked to her about different things she could try, and they've been good with us as far as that goes. We're just trying to have our people address this. If they pull up there and there's cars blocking the street, we have them addressing it. But, obviously it's not consistently the same people. It's different people doing it all on a regular basis. So it's really hard to kind of get that message out to not block the road there.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have anything for Lieutenant Carver? Okay, that'll conclude the sheriff's report. It will take us to unfinished business, and I will turn that over to our administrator, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a resolution for the renewal of the police district levy that needs to be sent to the auditor's office.
I will so move on unfinished business number 1.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Item number 2 is a resolution for the replacement of the Plain Township Police District levy.
I will so move on unfinished business number 2.
I'll second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
And that completes unfinished business.
And we will roll right into new business, and we will leave that with you as well.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a resolution to approve and authorize payment to the State of Ohio UST Fund for the 2020 underground storage tank fees.
I will so move. New business number
Second.
one. Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a resolution to enter into our agreement with OTARMA for the property casualty and vehicle insurance. This is our yearly renewal.
I will so move on to new business number 2.
I'll
Second.
second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 3 is a resolution for false alarms.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion, roll call.
Yes, I would like to say, oh, sorry, can I add
Go ahead,
something?
discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we are able to get back on track with the false alarms. There was a change when there was a change with the computer systems on the sheriff's side, and I want to thank Eric Haynes and Lieutenant Carver. We got together, had a meeting, and now we're able to get back on track with false alarms.
Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Okay, and item number 4 is a resolution to authorize payment to the Stark County Regional Planning for the 2020 dues.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
And that ends new business.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Okay, bear with me here just a minute. And that will take us to the fiscal officer's report. I will turn that over to Mr. Wolf.
Thank you. Fiscal Officer number 1 is a request for a resolution to authorize the payment of pending warrants in the amount of $121,383.45.
So moved.
So, second.
Second, we've got discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 2 is a request for resolution to authorize payment of regular payroll in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
I will move on fiscal officer number 2.
I'll second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 3 is a request for a resolution to authorize payment for the following medical claims.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 4 is the financial report for April 2020.
Anybody's got any discussion or questions, feel free to see Tom afterwards.
Fiscal Officer number 5 is the request for resolution to authorize the following transfer.
I will move on fiscal officer number 5.
I'll
Second,
second.
discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 6 is a request for resolution to authorize a refund as follows for overpayments for EMS as requested by Ohio Billing.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
and fiscal officer number 7 is a financial forecast I prepared May 7th. Just kind of goes over some of the things we're seeing related to COVID-19 and the economic effects it's having on the overall economy, and then as it relates to the township finances. So for the gas tax, according to reports, traffic in Ohio since March 13th is down 45%, which is definitely a significant decrease. So I was kind of estimating around a 20% decrease in gas tax revenue. That revenue usually lags a few months from till we receive it, so we may not actually see those decreases till later in the summer or early fall. But there will be definitely some impact on the gas tax based on the stay-at-home orders. Then we had the bed tax. Again, without business travel, that's going to be down significant in the township, and depending on what happens with the Hall of Fame festival, that could be definitely a huge impact to the bed tax we receive. I know I saw a report where in New York they said tourism-related industries would be down 80% during this time. I would estimate probably around 34 to maybe 50% decrease in bed tax, just depending on what happens with the Hall of Fame festival. The property tax, that the way our system is in Ohio, that stays pretty stable in good times and bad times. So there shouldn't be a huge impact this year or even into next year, since it's paid in arrears. We may have some delinquencies as people aren't working and not able to pay their taxes, or ones that have taken advantage of some of the federal programs that allows mortgages like a 30-day forbearance. And we still haven't received our final settlement from the county for property tax, which they switched over their system they're using. So we're about 30 days behind from when we would normally receive that. So that is costing us some money in interest income, but we received correspondence from the auditor's office that that payment should be coming mid-May to late May. So, and then the investment account, of course, the interest rates, we've kind of talked about those going down. They're significantly lower than they were last year. So I would expect our interest income to probably be half of what we had last year. So between all those categories, probably around 384,000 roughly, and declines in revenues, which would be about 2.3% of our budgeted revenues. That doesn't take into consideration all the lost revenue in parks with programming and reservations that have to be canceled or postponed, not having the farmer's market. And then I'm sure the EMS is probably down, since a lot of people are trying to avoid trips to the hospital unless it's absolutely necessary. So that was just kind of what I put together based on, I guess, best guesstimates. So I just wanted to, I guess, bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you so much for putting that together. It was so detailed. I loved it. It was so, good layman terms for me to understand it all.
Hey, Tom, one additional factor that I just want to call out here, and I know I had a conversation with you just prior to the meeting based upon a call I got from media representative, but I want it to be on the record. So for the sake of board thoughts, approximately, I think 2 weeks ago, give or take, the Stark County Commissioners passed a resolution as it relates to bed tax at the county level. I received some clarification from Brant Luther, the county administrator, that essentially that resolution that was passed was for the county to waive late fees / interest charges, given the explanation that was given. Now, given the county's decision doesn't have a direct bearing on our operations, it still drives the question as to somebody in the media had contacted me saying one of the hotel operators indicated that they were calling looking for some type of, whether it's payments or delay. And Tom, can you explain, just for the sake of the record? I know, Lisa, I've talked with you on this as well just before, but this is some type of like trust fund you were explaining, Tom, that this money goes into. So realistically, they're collecting it on the front end of the stay, and it should be going into this account, which then gets remitted back to us. So I'm not sure if there's really any value in entertaining the delay, the delay of those payments or so forth.
Yeah, trust fund tax, basically, it's not a tax on the business or an expense for the business. They're merely collecting the tax from the customer and then remitting it to us or to the county. So it's not really costing the business anything. They're just kind of the middle person collecting the money from the customer and then paying it to us. So, and they shouldn't be using that for any sort of operating purpose or payroll or anything like that, because it is a trust fund tax, so it doesn't legally belong to them. They're just collecting it to remit it. So it's not like it's necessarily a burden to the business. It's just they're collecting it and passing it on. So it's not like a tax where they're coming out of pocket to pay it. But unfortunately, when that money's in their account, it's probably tempting to use it to, make payroll or, make a mortgage payment or whatever their other operating costs. So then when they get to the end, when they have to file the report and pay it, a lot of times, unfortunately, they don't still have it in the account.
So, guys, I bring that up outside of clarification, visibility, and understanding, but I really feel from a board aspect, one, given a scenario like that, I can't see anywhere where we would entertain relief. And when I say relief, I'm not saying foregoing it, whether it's talking about payments or anything like that, because no different than Tom referenced opportunity cost. At some point, if we were ever to consider payments, well, then I think interest would have to come into play, because it's a cost of capital element. Any thoughts? I don't want to create a mountain out of a molehill here, but the fact that somebody from the press had reached out to me on this, and I'm not going to get into sound bites with them outside of what the matter of fact is, the fact that there's some been activity at the county level, and I think they're trying to use that as a opportunity here, maybe at the township level. I just think we need to be clear.
Yeah, so it just sounds to me, Tom, that you have indicated that when they collect that bed tax, that is supposed to go into a separate fund that should, I mean, if we would waive that or postpone it or whatever, wouldn't we kind of be...
We legally cannot waive it.
Helping them do something that might be illegal?
Correct. Yeah. And then the other issue is, every hotel in the township's going to be facing occupancy challenges until all this COVID stuff is resolved. So if you make that public, then a lot of them may see that as a way to finance operations when, I mean, that's not what that money's intended for. It does, like I said, it doesn't belong to them. They're just collecting it just the same way they do with sales tax that they have to
Sure.
pay. So it's not costing them anything. They're just responsible for collecting it and then remitting it.
And it's all covered under statute, so I don't even know if we have the authority to waive.
Sure. I mean, it doesn't
Or-
sound,
That's what I was saying. So what I'm saying is if they come to us going, hey, well, we can make it in payments because guess what? We spent it somewhere else. I think that's where we do take the liberty of considering moving forward, some type of interest charge to it, because it's an opportunity expense that we're foregoing, you know, because of their delay in payment to us, the ability to use that. So there's a cost.
And you're right, Scott, that has happened one other time when a hotel got behind, and we did create an agreement with them that did include interest. So that would be my recommendation if somebody stopped paying it, because again, it's just a pass-through account for them, and I don't even think legally bound by the ORC we can waive or delay. But I agree, that's something, again, I'd bring to the board, any sort of agreement, but it would include interest.
sure.
Okay. Tom, thanks for letting me interject that on the end of your report. No further discussion. That concludes your report?
Yeah, that concludes fiscal officer report.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. We'll go from the fiscal officer's report to the administrator, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a resolution to authorize payment to Canton Data Print for the printing and postage of the 2020 summer newsletter.
So moved.
Second,
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
yes.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a resolution by the Plain Township Board of Trustees to enter into the attached agreement between the trustees and Kent State Corporate University for the 7-hour seminar.
I'll move on
So moved.
Administrator 2.
So John made the motion. Brooks got the second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 3 is a resolution to enter into the attached agreement between the Plain Township Board of Trustees and Stark County Health Department for the 2020 mosquito spraying program.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Again, this was something that came up at the annual health department meeting about costs going up. They're having much more difficult time trying to find folks to come in, do the driving and so forth. So I think all things equal, we're still in a good position here. We've had this contract on a year-to-year basis with the health department, and it's made a world of difference. So no further discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 4 is just a discussion. Mr. Iacino and I had a big sign made that is now at the yard waste that states no sharing of cards, no walking in the yard waste without the cards. I just wanted to review with the board that if we do have somebody who illegally dumps down there, the step will be to call the sheriff's office because, again, that site is under 24/7 surveillance. So we get the license plate, we get the vehicle make and model, we see the people coming in, and the fines are based on the Ohio Revised Code, so they will be fined. And then I think the approach will be, for a first-time offender, if they want to, try to fight that fine, they need to write a letter to the board to bring it up for discussion. And again, we have the sheriff's office there. We have deputies there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday this first month just to reinforce that.
Well, I think definitely the signage is important, and it's crazy because even with all this, what signage and markings we've had down there, clearly some folks just absolutely do not pay attention, whether it's trying to exit out the entrance while there's markings on the asphalt showing going out, to some of the, all I can do is laugh, some of the more amusing things of folks parking outside of the gates and attempting to carry bags in, or bringing their little Red Ryder wagons down and across and around the gates. I mean, for any resident, whether you're listening in or whether you watch this video later, this is a private service for Plain Township residents. It's only a small nominal fee at $25. It goes to cover, the site and pulling that. There is absolutely nowhere where you're going to get this value, whether it's through your refuse, your normal trash pickup, or a landscaper. So, to the point, if you're going to try skirting or concerned about the cost, there is still the Stark Tusk-Wayne Joint Solid Waste District funded site up at Lake Township. However, you can't be using Plain Township for free. So whether it's card sharing or thinking you're just going to walk around, because ultimately the board, we've got to take a hard line stance on this, so we don't facilitate a foster a culture of abuse here. So, the team's done
And
a
then
good
that's
job.
the end of, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Lisa. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that's all I had under that report. You're right that they have done a good job of monitoring. And again, the fees, I'm hearing people say, well, I pay property taxes, but those don't fund the yard waste. We're trying to make this a self-funding for residents only, yard waste site so that it can continue. And we do have a 2-year contract with Earth and Wood, and we do want it to run smoothly so that we can extend the contract. So that's why we are being so thoughtful with the cost and also with the enforcement, because we do want to be able to continue to contract a service.
And again, make no mistake about it. At no point ever was the yard waste site prior to this year funded solely by Plain Township. It was a Stark Tusk-Wayne Joint Solid Waste District that we had to make a decision based upon their continued reduced funding, and then only being able to operate to that level. For those taxpayers, those are not your taxpayer dollars that were going into that. That was private dollars that the trash refuse companies pay in tipping fees, that then a portion goes back out for recycling. So it's never been taxpayer dollars. Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
And that's the end of my report. Yes, thank you.
Next thing, fire department, Chief Schallenberger.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 1 is a resolution to authorize purchase and payment of 1 electric ventilation fan per attached quote, not to exceed $4,000, to be taken from Fund 10A08.
I will so move on fire number 1.
I'll second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a resolution to authorize payment for diagnostic and repair work to Medic 2 to truck sales and service, not to exceed $3,000.
I'll move on FD.
I'll make a second. Well, John's got the motion. I've got the second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo.
Yes.
Okay, item number 3 is a resolution to authorize purchase and payment to Menards for flooring and base materials for 2855 Easton Street, not to exceed $4,000, to be taken from Fund 10A and 1B02.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo.
Yes.
And item number 5, I didn't have on my agenda, but they had in there, was a thank you from the Avondale Homeowners Association about our flag project on Fulton. And I just like to say, well, they did a lot of work on their own to get that going. We just provided the, the manpower. So it looked nice, and it was a great tribute to all the, not just first responders, but healthcare workers, truck drivers, essential people. That's what they were trying to promote with that project. And then we're going to continue it with our Fly the Flag program throughout the year on Memorial Day and their other major holidays.
Yeah, that looked real nice. Yes, it
beautiful.
did.
And then I guess I got them out of order here at number, and then obviously I wanted to thank you for our renewal. Just like to say to the residents on behalf of the fire department, board of trustees, appreciate the renewal of our fire levy. We're going to continue to have the highest quality service we can, be cost effective, and continue the service we've had over many years. So we just like to say thanks to everyone that supported us.
Again, that's, I think the service we delivered, it speaks for itself. When we have 81% of the public supporting that levy, especially in as difficult at times as some folks are dealing with right now financially with the pandemic and everything, we've never ever had to question the support of our safety services. And I mean, I think that's a bottom to top, top to bottom. It speaks about the focus and the level of service we're providing and the quality there. So thanks to the residents.
And that concludes fire department.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the road department, and I'm going to turn that over to Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have couple items tonight. Item number 1 is a resolution to hire Evan Bland as a summer employee for the road department effective May 18th at a rate of $11 per hour, pending pre-employment drug and alcohol testing.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Item number 2 is a resolution to hire James DiMarzio in the road department effective May 18th, 2020 at an hourly rate of $19.18 for probationary new hire. After a successful probationary period of 1 year, he moved to the rate with the contract, all pending alcohol and background checks and drug and alcohol testing.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Hey,
Mr.
Joe,
Hawes?
wait. Joe, before
Yes.
we do, isn't this the same guy who used to work part-time for us? Summer help?
Yeah. Yeah, he worked 2 summers for us. I'm going to see about 8
good.
years. Yes, he
Good.
has some background with us.
Yep, good. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Roll
Roll
call.
call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. Haas, do you want me to talk about Route 43 or?
How about
Are you gonna do it?
I can bring them up, and if you want to interject from what you've got. The first one being earlier this week, or was it the tail end of last week? I forget. We had received the update regarding ODOT's review and assessment of the State Route 43 Market and Mount Pleasant intersections there. That essentially stemmed from the 3 phases that started from 55th up to Grove, Grove to Apple Grove, and then still forward looking Apple Grove up to Mount Pleasant. And essentially there's some line of sight issues, concerns because of, Mount Pleasant and 43, you've got the church, and you've got some telephone poles there that make it extremely difficult to see, and more accident prone. But then over on Market in Mount Pleasant, you're dealing with storage buildings that are right up on the corner. And ODOT had essentially had a number of different variations that they've worked through. There have been a number of opportunities for public input. We've been involved with that, but essentially where we're at right now is with the option 3. It's option 3, I believe, is what it's labeled, where they're talking about a signal right where it Y's, and then Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, there's another signal on Market and Mount Pleasant there, right by the storage buildings, and then I think there was one more, just a little bit north on.
No,
43.
for signals. They're going to cul-de-sac Mount Pleasant in between Kent and Market. And there's 2 homes there that they have to give access to the driveways plus the church's parking lot. So they're going to cul-de-sac that, and then you won't have any westbound or eastbound traffic on that section. You'll have to go down to the light at the Y and then go around. That alternative is alternative 3. It's pretty cost effective. They looked at roundabouts and they looked at other things, but this sounds like what they decided on.
Well, and I think it's important for the public. I mean, this project, Joe, this goes back essentially 3 years ago when you take a look at those 3 stretches of 55th, Grove, Apple Grove, Mount Pleasant, and this coming into it. So this hasn't just happened overnight. There's been a lot of work and effort, and there's still a lot of work to be done outside of settling on a plan, and that they have to submit it for funding. So really, we've got to wait and hear on the funding approval is the next step. And once we would have the funding approval, that would determine when it could go out to bid and then actually be scheduled to be done. So knowing timetables and everything, we're probably still looking at a best case scenario, 1.5 years, you think? Best case, probably 1.5 to 2+ years, you think? Or not sure.
They were trying to fast track it earlier to get it done next year. With everything going on, I'm sure that's gotten delayed. And it looks like you're probably looking more like 2022 for that. If they get their funding, which they have to apply for right now, probably to get that project under bid.
Perfect. Okay, so that covers that one. The next one that we had, this is really a continuation of something we helped foster and facilitate within our own township that the other municipalities around us are starting to take advantage of, and that's the work on the railroad tracks closest to Plain, because knowing we may get some calls just because of the Canton City and Plain Township border there, right by Rice's Nursery at 55th and Firestone. Those tracks will be closed for a week starting Monday the 18th for the railroad to do a number of repairs. And Joe, you said there was possibly a couple other sets of tracks that will be in close proximity to the township that will probably be addressed as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I received a call from Casey O'Connor, who's the superintendent from Wheeling Lake Erie Railroad this morning. And of course, he wanted us to do the asphalt work on all of them, but we can't do that because they got a lot of praise from what we did on Snyder Road, including the one on 55th. They're talking to the county right now on the one on Martindale, which is getting pretty rough. And when the bridge is closed on Spangler, John, as you know, they're going to do that railroad crossing during that closure time. So
Yeah, it's closed right now. It's closed now.
yeah, those are both city
Yeah.
maintenance wise for right now. So
But again,
he
close
said
proximity to us.
right.
Okay. Thanks, Joe, for letting me tack those on. I just think they're important updates for public
Sure.
visibility here. So,
All right, that's the end of the road
Nothing
department
else.
report.
thank you, Joe. We've got a quiet evening from the zoning department. Nothing noted here, Tom.
Unfortunately, I don't have to speak tonight, as much as I like.
Okay, that'll take us to the Parks Department, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. I'm going to jump out of order because the other three are kind of lumped together, and I think we can talk about them in whole. So I want to just jump to number 2 real quick and give you an update on our turf renovation. We are in the process of completing that project. They're waiting on some materials to finish that up. Once they get in, they'll schedule the time with us to get back in the building and finish that project up for us. Shouldn't be too long. They felt a couple weeks just based on the manufacturing and shipment. So I'll keep all posted on that, but it's gone well thus far. They've been great to work with. And again, we're thrilled to have Forever Lawn help us out with that on their own accord. If there are any questions, I can answer them, or I can kind of move on to the next group.
Just go ahead and move on.
Excellent. Okay, so the next group in regards to the dog park, the programming, reservations, and splash pad. Obviously, currently they remain closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I did send out an email with some general information. I tracked down between the COVID-19 hotline from the state health department, the Stark County Health Department, and other local government jurisdictions I had the opportunity to speak to on these pieces and what they may or may not be doing with them. So I just wanted to kind of open it up for discussion. I wanted to possibly point out that in regards to funding being down through programming pretty dramatically, as Mr. Wolf alluded to earlier, we may want to keep some of these things closed because of the inordinate cost of maintenance and renovation that comes with them. I'm certainly open to anything the board would have to suggest or discuss and move with that direction. But some of the cost saving measures would include lower utility bills, less need for PPE and some of the cleaning supplies, general fixes, be it water pipes or fountains or et cetera, et cetera. But in the whole, I thought it would be pertinent to maybe bring these up for discussion tonight so we can be at least looking forward one way or the other.
John or Brooke, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I think we should look at every program that is expensive to us and push back for the amount of time that we're going to open. I think when it comes to, where that money comes from, that's a pretty bleak picture based on the bed tax. For us, bed tax obviously is big for us, helping to fund the parks. Gas tax doesn't, property tax doesn't, but that bed tax is a big deal, and we're going to lose a lot of money. And we know the splash pad is very expensive to operate. If we were operating it and had the ability to have a lot of people involved, that would be one thing, but I'm not in favor of opening anything that costs us money for small groups of people, because we know that it's not going to be a light switch where all of a sudden in a few weeks we're going to have masses of the people being able to assemble somewhere. And I think with the issues of policing and so many issues, keeping it close to me, and it's just my opinion, but keeping them closed is the easiest way to facilitate it.
I agree. I think it'll be too hard for us to try to police up and try to make, I mean, we're gonna have to have either have everybody working overtime or being outsourced to police or something to maintain that everybody's socially distanced. There's just no, and without us bringing in a lot of revenue right now, I don't think it's a good plan to open.
I'm going to add, I'll echo a lot of the same comments as you, John. I think the financial picture is the big piece, especially given, you know, how much of a revenue hit we've already taken. You combine that with the fact, and I hope the public still understands, we do not have a parks levy that helps fund these operations. And even though the Stark Parks levy may have just recently passed, that has zero bearing on the Plain Township parks. I'm not gonna lie, I'd like to see people back out sooner than later. I'm not ready to say, hey, everything is immediately canceled through the end of June or July. I think we still have to be fluid like we've commented before, but when you take a look at some of the information Rob shared with us, you know, again, things that the general public may not give a whole lot of thought to, but the use of restrooms and the nice flush facilities we have as compared to porta johns. I'm sure everybody that's on this call, you give second thoughts before you really have to use a porta john versus a flush facility that, you know, tends to be clean. Not that there aren't porta john companies out there that don't do a good job at cleaning, but human nature is scratching your head, be like, yeah, I don't necessarily know. Furthermore, I don't think it's remotely reasonable or responsible to have to take staff, even if we were paying a minimum wage, and cleaning those facilities multiple times a day. Realistically, we'd have to be putting some type of sanitizer stations at all of these things. On the programming side, I really hope our league stuff come in the fall, we're able to ramp something up there, or I mean, else it's going to be all the more difficult. That being said, no different than we're not, I think it's responsible to not open everything up right now from an expense management aspect, knowing, you know, a portion of the parks comes out of the general fund. We should not be dragging, we should not be striping anything. Minimal acceptable mowing to keep the fields in decent shape, so when things get going, I think we as well use this as an opportunity to research and identify, and not just research and identify, but engage potential partners. We know we will never, ever, under any circumstance, be able to run the parks just strictly off of grants and donations and corporate sponsorship. But we should have some capacity and bandwidth to step back and go, hey, can we find somebody to partner with for a wind fence around the dog park? Can we find, you know, somebody that wants to sponsor this area, so when things do get good, guess what? Not only can we get back on track, but we can help advance some things. There's still, you know, capital improvement things where it may be a little harder to be dialing for dollars right now, working on long-term goals, but we never pick that phone up and just do that immediately overnight anyways. So let's take advantage of some of that time. I think
if you don't mind me interjecting just real quick, I wanted to touch on, sorry.
Go ahead, Rob.
I apologize. I wanted to interject when it comes to the maintenance. We are indeed mowing just to keep the grass in shape so that if and when something were to open, we would be ready to open. We aren't lining or striping fields. We aren't setting out goals. We aren't doing any of that. What we are doing, just to clarify, is we are doing minimal dragging because those fields with weathering alone will get warped and unplayable if we don't keep a minimum effort on maintenance with them. So we do drag them once a week just to make sure that they're rolled and they're smooth and they're capable of being utilized if and when we can open. So I wanted to clarify that real quick. The maintenance side of the sports field is minimal. Just keeping them in condition enough that if we can open, we can open.
Do you already have
I
all
do-
the
I
stuff
do think-
purchased to paint the fields? And all that?
We do. We have our equipment and our supplies. We order them typically in February to make sure we're ready for a March, April open. Obviously, the March, April open got canceled in the middle of March. We are ready to paint. We are ready to line. We are ready to set fields up when the time is appropriate to do so. And the product is in good condition, if I'm answering that correctly.
Well, I think as we talk about closure of stuff, closure of the splash pad, especially, we have seen across the state. Is somebody talking?
I don't know. I heard that echo.
And it's not me. Okay, the closure of the splash pad, I know we've seen a number of articles too. I mean, what I don't think the public really understands or has a general awareness to is, I mean, that's a $6,000 to $7,000 a month water bill just to run that free thing. So when we look at these revenue factors being reduced, knowing nothing's charged, and then we're being asked to consider compounding those costs with stationing somebody or somebody's there to ensure certain distance, there's just no reasonable or feasible way to do that. So for your agenda item, I think on the splash pad, that's definitely clear. Update on the dog park, I think even though it's different than the splash pad, I think we still have to keep it closed is my opinion, because let's face it, dogs don't know how to socially distance, and not that I would expect them to, but the people in the parks will naturally congregate close together just because of their dogs being so close. And then as far as programs and reservations, I think, Rob, we've worked the programs all the way through May at this point.
That is correct. May and programming really is shut down through May, beginning of June, because of the way the seasons overlapped into June. Really what we're looking at, the possible extension of is possibly the reservations into June, into the end of June, because of the Rule of 10 guidelines still in place. And again, we'd have to be able to police that when there are bodies there.
It's kind of like a robot.
The voice. Well, that's another thing with the splash pad. Kids don't, Scott pointed out dogs don't socially distance. Kids won't either. I mean, there's no way to keep those kids distance at a playground or a splash pad or the water fountain. I'm just thinking of all the, little hands touching the water fountains.
Mm-hmm.
I do think specific to reservations, so we're not doing a mad dash at our next meeting. I mean, I think we at least push reservations to the middle of June. That way, if new information comes up between now and the end of May, we can advise, and essentially that's still keeping things a month out. John or Brooke, anything else to add?
Yeah, I like
so far.
I think we continue to do like we have been doing, where we have not made a commitment to just pull the plug and decide to keep everything closed, nor have we decided we're going to open it up to the masses. I think we've done a good job at watching what's going on, and we haven't ruled anything out, but we still have to watch to see what the governor and the director of the Department of Health are going to establish for us as a protocol. So I agree. We just look at those individually and do it on a day-by-day basis, not having a closed mind to anything.
Yeah, I will say, actually, during this meeting, I had received a message. I've already screenshot it and send it to Rob, but I have a resident that sent me a message saying, hey, I wanted to reach out to you for some clarification on the township view/stance on organized team practices in our parks. There are signs posted that say fields are closed through the end of May, but they've noticed organized team practices beginning. They're clearly looking for guidance. I just want to be on the record. Rob, we know that, we've only got finite staff, certain hours. We can't park a sheriff's cruiser there all the time. However, for anybody in the public that is trying to coordinate, even though it's not through the parks, it is not allowed. It is not a permissible use. And should you be caught, we will ensure you are accordingly fined or removed from using of the grounds for violating those basic rules. Rob, anything to add, or John or Brooke?
No,
I have
sorry,
one thing.
I think
Rob,
when
does? Oh, no, go ahead.
Rob, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we've been following the governor's recommendations as it pertains to youth sports. I know that he's got an outdoor recreation advisory committee that are meeting, and they're even discussing quote unquote swimming pools. That there should be an announcement towards the end of the week. But what I have been telling people is simply that until social distancing guidelines allow gatherings, we tend to remain closed, because if you look at a normal night of even just practice in those parks, you're talking at well over 1,000 people gathering between the sports and ball fields. And that's not a low estimate by any means. That's a pretty safe estimate based on the usage that we typically get there. I think we just follow the recommendations and guidelines accordingly. And trust me, when I can tell you, we would love to open when we're allowed to open. We want to be ready to open when we can open. But we have to be able to open to do so.
Well,
Can I
and I
ask,
would
when
agree
does
with
the
that.
second
but-
session start?
Let's give Brooke,
Like the
because Brooke
summer
was,
session?
if you don't mind, Brooke, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, you're fine. I was gonna ask,
No,
I know you said that we wrap up usually for summer at the beginning of June. When does the summer sessions for a normal season usually start?
August.
At the end of June?
August.
So that would give
Yeah.
us enough time to get, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Once we get into mid to end of June, we have some sparse reservations, nothing major as seasons finish up and tournaments finish up. And then it's usually mid-August that next season kicks off in full.
Is that when they start, organized teams start reserving spots to practice? Is
They
mid-August?
usually
Okay.
start reserving August 1 in that general time frame for mid-August to late August start and mid to end of October finish.
Okay, so if we did what Scott suggested about till mid-June, we would be okay for now. We wouldn't be infringing on any other.
No, we wouldn't have any programming overlap. We would simply be looking at reservations at this point, and then taking on the reservations as well for fields and things of that nature as the governor outlines the guidelines, as I mentioned previously.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, I was only going to say that, it's easy sometimes for the governor to establish a protocol. And I think we've done a really good job in making sure that we try to follow that. But on the opposite side of that, if he starts making a protocol that would allow for some openings, but in our case, it would be resource prohibitive, I'm not sure we want to just automatically follow what the governor says we can do. I think we should analyze the cost versus benefit of what we do and then go from there. Because if, for example, he says we can open up under these conditions, but it requires us to have people there at certain times. And then we start to see that we're putting out a lot of money just for the purpose of monitoring people. I'm not necessarily in favor of that. Because again, we're back to what's the cost versus benefit of this? Now I realize,
to clean up the mess and everything.
Yeah. So again, it may be simpler in some cases, but for us, and the utilization of our parks and our resources and our employees and everything else. I think we should just, before we decide that we're going to do something, I think we should continue to talk amongst us as what are the benefits, the cost versus benefit evaluation.
Yes,
I
sir.
agree.
I agree with that, and that's kind of what I tried to outline for you today with some of this other stuff.
Sure.
And
you
Rob,
did,
can
bud.
you talk to the secretaries too? Because I don't want them, when we get calls, when's the dog park opening? And I've been hearing a lot of, well, when the governor releases social distancing, like John said, and that may not be the case. So it's,
At the end of the day,
you know,
at the end of the day, it's the plain. Sorry, Lisa. In short, we tell the
No, you're
residents,
fine.
at the end of the day, it's the Plain Township Board of Trustees decision, which one of our sources of information will be the Director of Health and the governor and so forth. Just because the governor says something doesn't mean they've got the final rule and say here. So that direction will come from the Board of Trustees at a future point.
yeah,
Correct.
I like that.
Continuing to monitor the situation and have internal discussion when it's appropriate, we'll revisit.
Yes.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
Copy. Thank you.
Thanks.
That concludes parks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That moves us on to Law Director, Mr. Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hawes. We have one item on the agenda for Law Director. That is the House Bill, or Senate Bill, 310. My picture just went to a picture of the gate.
Yeah, same
Mine
here.
too.
Okay. I had it queued up and everything. But anyway, it is the Senate Bill 310, and that was passed. And in order to receive the distribution that is set out in the formula for local government funds, we need to pass this resolution that affirms that those funds will only be used for certain things. And it spells them out, and they're COVID-19 related. So essentially, expenditures that we've had, and it includes some EMS stuff and fire stuff and stuff like that. So basically, we need to just pass this as a housekeeping matter to indicate we affirm that we'll use those funds as they're intended.
Okay.
Let's see here. Bear with me. I'm just scrolling back through this. So
No, that's
We've actually
okay.
got-
As part of that, I want to remind Tom, if you could certify the resolution, because we do have to send it to the county office or the county auditor and the Ohio Office of Budget and Management.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So for the sake of discussion, I will move on Law Director number 1.
second. Discussion.
So then this money would have a separate line item, Tom? It would go into a separate line item? Is that how that works?
Correct. Yeah, we can't put it into the general fund, and we have to make sure we have good documentation because the Ohio Auditor's Office already said they'll be focused on it.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Do
Do we have to vote on it?
Do we do a roll call on that?
All right.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
Rolling down to the point. So Tom, do we already have the motion and the second on that?
Correct.
Roll
Yep.
call. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Okay, so that concludes the law director. Get back up to the top of the agenda here. It's going to bring us to communications. I will turn that over to Ms. Campbell.
Hi, yes, we do have one communication this evening, and it reads, hello. I would just like to compliment you for the smooth operating yard waste procedures. It was very user-friendly, and I'm so pleased. Signed by Mary Dick, and it was nice to receive that communication. And again, I just want to thank the whole team involved with the yard waste for bringing this together so well.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that's the end of communication.
Yeah, we had that discussion earlier on all the issues with the yard waste, but I think it is important to point out that we did have but over 1,000 people purchased cards, and we had very few complaints about that issue. So those people that actually are complaining just still do not understand that this has nothing to do with their property taxes that they pay. It is not separately.
Correct.
So everything that we are doing, when we had a discussion of what was going to happen with the yard waste, we had many residents either make direct contact with us or even come to meetings and say, we're willing to pay for this service. If you create a fee, we'll probably more than likely pay it. And I think it's been pretty obvious that over 1,000 people paying that money, I think it is a good service. And to all those people that worked to pull this off, I know a couple of our secretaries were getting phone calls from people that did not live in Plain Township. And, when they were given the answer, you have to be a resident. Some of those people weren't very polite to our employees. And, I know that they were professional in how they handled it, but they really shouldn't have to take that from somebody who isn't a resident and, is harassing and belittling our employees. That's it. That's all I have to say about that.
Honestly, I would concur with you, John, on that. And quite frankly, I would advise our staff that, those calls, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, and you terminate it, because there's no reason to tolerate that. Either folks are going to call in our office and they can be civil and have a level of decorum that's acceptable. Otherwise, we're not going to tolerate that, as far as I'm concerned. Okay.
So thank our employees for being patient and tolerating that and being professional in how they handle it, please.
Yes.
That wraps up communications. It brings us to the portion of the meeting, public speaks. Is there anybody on the line that wishes to address the Board of Trustees regarding any specific township matters? If you would wish to address the board, we would ask that you state your name and your address for the record, and then we will proceed. Is there anybody that wishes to address the board?
Yes. Yes, Eric Haynes. Eric Haynes, I do want to speak on behalf of exactly what you all just articulated, that, the cooperation of all of the departments, the road department, the fire department, the administrative office assistants, the finance department, everybody was able to really pull together and make this a successful project. So I want to take my hat off and tip my hat to each and every one of them. So thank you, and including the board.
Teamwork makes the dream work. So good stuff. Is there anybody else that wishes to address the board? Okay. We'll move forward from public speaks, takes us to concerns of trustees. I had 2 items. The first, as many of you know, our monthly Stark County Township Association meetings have gotten shaken up too over this COVID thing. Our original May meeting had been canceled. However, we have an opportunity to get another update from the Stark Economic Development Board on the 21st of next week. And the notice was just sent out. It'll start at 5:40. Some of the conversation topics have to do with an update on the economic activity within Stark County, an update on the Faith and Stark grant project, an update on the pandemic effect on industry sectors within Northeast Ohio, then an overview of available upskilling, training, and education opportunities. And then for the communities that may not be as fortunate to have some experienced fiscal officers, especially where we're blessed with a CPA here, we have a couple folks across the Stark County that are newly elected fiscal officers. We're going to have some open discussion to help them better understand what they need to do in getting up to speed, as well as being able to get to the level of, Tom, like what you presented here tonight, with an assessment of, you know, financial impact and so forth. So that'll be next Thursday, the 21st, 5:40. My second item was, I just want to give a shout out, especially to JP Neff and Rob Steinberg. Last week we had got word that these guys, I know there were some other players that probably helped getting it formatted and so forth, but secured a $49,980 startup grant that's going to go towards helping pave part of the west parking lot at Diamond over by the recyclables. So that will again continue to enhance and improve the experience not only of our residents, but anybody that frequents that for recycling purposes. So I only wanted to highlight that for the fact that, again, our team is constantly focused on where are other avenues and conduits that we can leverage resources to help provide services that we do, given some of our fixed revenue streams or the lack thereof. So nice work, gentlemen.
Thanks.
That concludes concerns of trustees, unless Trustee Harless or Trustee Sabo, you happen to have anything to add?
No,
You said it perfectly.
That'll conclude concerns of trustees. It'll take us to concerns of the fiscal officer. Mr. Wolf, anything?
No concerns.
Okay, that will take us to the approval of the meeting minutes for April 28th, 2020, and I will so move.
second,
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Sabo,
yes.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless.
Yes.
Okay, there is not a need for executive session, so I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn from this regular meeting at 7:36 p.m.
I'll second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Harless.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.